William.
Professor Williams.
So we've been trying to get this together for a little bit and wanted to try this new feature with my students. And one of the things that we had wanted to incorporate this time around is trying to utilize AI. Obviously, it's a tool that we're just not going to be able to escape.
Nope.
And so how do we embrace it? How do we utilize it? How do we, incorporate it into the class?
Yeah.
And recognize that the students are going to ultimately be using that tool probably from here on out, one way or another.
Forever. I mean, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's already made its way into government policies as well. So,
Right.
I mean, that just shows you how strong it is. So,
Right. And your background, of course, you've got your graduate degree. It was in public policy.
yes.
And your white paper, your master's thesis, actually had to do with AI.
It was all about it. And depending on who's taking this class now, you may have already taken a survey related to my paper. So thank you for your participation.
That is correct. That was last semester.
Yeah.
And I did have students do
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
They're not going to see that this semester.
Yeah.
You're done. Why would we do that? Why
Right.
would we continue?
Right. That's true.
So so this is political science 201, it's federal systems of government, and again, we're trying to utilize the AI, and I'm gonna link this video actually closer to the introduction lecture, which is what we had talked about in my face-to-face class and what I'm sharing with you on my online classes. And I asked them to do the same thing that you saw in terms of the instructions, to take the first lecture, run it through AI, ask him AI, either chat or Copilot, to break it down and summarize it. And then I asked the students to work with AI to figure out what would be kind of a good question to ask a professor based upon those lecture notes.
Nice.
Yeah. And so having had a bit of a conversation with you, there were 4 questions that came out. I thought the best one, not the best one, but one I thought was interesting enough to want to have a conversation about was from a group of students who asked, based upon their results from AI, how do or can political scientists ensure conclusions are reliable despite a lack of certainty? And that's a great question.
That's a fantastic question.
And right. And so based upon our little bit of noodling, just kind of having a conversation about this, it's a good question because we really are just a product of the information that we have access to. And that's everything.
Yeah.
Now, through scientific inquiry, we use multiple approaches to gaining an understanding. Utilizing our senses, doing scientific both research and experiments and replicating the experiments to get the same results, to give us more and more certainty. But even the best information that we can garner is still going to have variables that are going to lead to some uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point, it's not really about the perfection of the source that you have, but how many sources you have altogether.
Good point.
How even if they're contrasting, they're still important. It's the small details that you want to look out for. And at the end of the day, the more you have, the more you can go off of, the more of a conclusion that you can make for yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right. So as long as they're legit.
Yeah.
Right. And again, what is legit? That's also a good question. Ideology plays such a role in political science and shaping policy, and both in the context of political ideology, but just in terms of ideology like conservatism versus liberalism, or, to the degree that we want individualism versus collectivism. All of those play a role in what we accept or want to accept as true, oftentimes wanting to fit, kind of our understanding and our narrative.
Right.
And probably a downfall in political science is that we have this outcome or this idea of what we think to be correct, right, and true. And so then we'll look for information that gets us to that, right? Versus allowing the information to draw the conclusion or to push us towards a conclusion. We start from a conclusion and say, okay, now what sources are there out there that are going to drive me to this conclusion?
Yeah. And I think that the larger attention span you have, the more you'll look into
right.
it. But if you're younger,
right.
This is one of the points that I had made to you. If you're younger, your attention span is obviously dwindled down, not as much as others. So, if you're looking on social media or something like that, and you come across a post, your conclusion is already set. You only have that amount of detail to go off from.
Yeah.
And you don't take the time to look into other articles and
Right.
other sources because you don't have that much
Right.
attention.
You're on to the
Right?
next issue or
Yeah.
next item.
Yeah. But why would you need to? Because you don't feel like you have the obligation to do so. Because
Yeah.
you're only convincing yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that I think is true of kind of a current generation and probably from your generation down. I would
Yeah.
say you're Gen Z, I'm
Yeah.
Gen X,
Yeah.
and whatever that generation's coming in are kind of a product of the TikTok world or even Vines. Remember the
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's more so from my perspective, if anything, you know, obviously because I'm younger. But I mean, I see so many individuals who get confused purely because they don't want to pay attention. It's not because they can't pay attention; it's because they don't want.
Okay, so they don't have the but that inquiry that drives them to say, okay, wait a second, that didn't make sense, or
Right.
this is correct. Okay,
Right.
and so they won't go down the rabbit hole and start digging and digging. You would
They won't make that logical conclusion. They
Mm.
they won't, and it's not on them because you know they only have a couple handful of sources that they're looking for at the end of the day.
Sure.
And they don't know about these certain routes that they
Ah,
can take.
good point.
You know, they're not as informed as others
Well,
would
that's
be,
true,
right?
right? And that's part of the role of education is to create critical thinkers.
Mhm.
So back to our question, which was why it's a good question. The
Yep.
fact that the student or AI,
Yep.
right? The AI may have generated this question, but it's a good question for students to ask. Okay, so again, back to this idea of how do we ensure that the information we pass on, is reliable, given the fact that we're just a product of the information that we have access to, just like any of you. I will say though, on top of that information that we have at hand, we also have experience. This, as I said, Professor Williams, it's his education, it's his background.
Yes.
My education background is the same, and then we've got, I've got a lifetime experience, and he's got some great experiences as well.
Yeah.
In the field.
Right.
So some of this information you actually get a chance to see play out in real time in the real world, and that helps to solidify an understanding of the information and how it's presented. I would argue too that if we take and accept, as this first lecture alludes to, that self-interest drives the motives of all individuals, right, universally, and we start to think in terms of those foundations, if we accept them to be true, and I don't know, right, and until there's a better theory and somebody who can show that this isn't true, I would accept it as the truth that you're driven by what motivates you. You're spending your time right now taking this class. What is it that has motivated you to take this class?
That's true.
And the individuals who get up in the morning to go to work or choose not to, or whatever it is, they're being motivated themselves by these choices and what they believe to be in their best interest.
Right. Yeah. And I think again that comes with, age.
Yeah.
How much of a drive do you have
Yeah.
to get up in the morning and to do something new?
Right.
And
Right.
again, how many avenues do you have right now? If you're a kid who's in middle school, you don't have that many options to go out and find a job
Right.
at your age than others. And it all comes with the experience.
Right.
Right. So
That's true. Different pressures are going to make you change your self-interest.
yeah.
Right.
And I think that can also apply with finding the right sources as well.
Well, 100%. That's where I was actually getting to. Is that okay? So if we accept that our self-interest drives us, we can use, as we're looking at our sources, we can use that to gauge just common sense whether or not the actions of a government or the actions of an individual within government are acting rationally. They won't always, and they don't always, and that always throws individuals a curveball.
Yep.
But generally speaking, we talk in generalities, generally speaking, individuals acting in that way will act rational, and we can then, I don't want to call it necessarily empathy, but at least put ourselves in that position to say, okay, this makes sense. This is why this happened. I don't know until you can show me a better argument. I wouldn't deviate from that. So then when we're looking at our written sources, the information that we have, and again, for the most part, if we're going back to the Constitution, not too many videos out there, right? And unless we pull out the Ouija board or the crystal ball.
Yeah, I'm good, but yeah.
All right, we'll avoid that for
Yeah.
right now. A later episode, maybe.
Maybe.
But it's all in written form. And so the best that we have is going to the written documentation of what happened, what the debates were, context of what was going on at the time, right? And then if we use that, I guess, as a recipe,
Yeah.
the information, multiple sources, as Professor Williams said, that scientific inquiry using rationalization in terms of this is what rational individuals would do, and then putting it into context, what was going on at the time, particularly when we get to the Constitution, laws in general. Um, um, in terms, and again, in terms of our political relationships, that's the best we can do when it comes to gaining certainty and reliability in what is being conveyed.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important not to think about it in the context of this day and age, but in the context of
Oh, 100%.
way back when.
That's
I mean,
what, yeah,
just as you said.
context.
I mean, truly, it's very important to see as to what these individuals were making these decisions for
Yeah,
back in their time.
right.
Because obviously we live in
Right.
an age of cars and advancements that have been well
And
beyond their
right.
timeline.
And you're going to find that those are constant debates and conversations that we have when the issues come before the Supreme Court, differences in political philosophy or constitutional philosophy, whether we're talking about what we call judicial originalism,
Yeah.
which is the focus that we have in our class,
Yeah.
trying to get to the context, and that drives the content and the understanding of the content. Or if it's the concept of a living, breathing, changing constitution,
That's true.
which is the idea of, okay, we're going to start from the point that this Constitution was really meant to just bind us together as a society and ensure that we lived harmoniously and progressed collectively together. And that anything that deviates from that, then, regardless of what the words say, regardless of what the context was, regardless of what the notes and information, regardless of what was rationally happening at the time, if it deviates from that concept, then it must not be constitutional.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Tough.
That's a
Tough.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we lectured about, or you'll read in lecture, when it comes to the judges, all judges will indicate they're an originalist because they recognize that if they're supplanting their opinion or their beliefs for what is right versus what the Constitution actually says and what was intended to do, then they're not really acting as judges anymore. They're acting as, right, they're acting as potentially dictators, oligarchs
With their own self-interest and
with
no
their
context.
exactly. Very good.
Mhm.
All right. So I think we'll lay that one to rest anyway. And again, guys, if you have questions of me and this may have generated more questions, you can run them through AI again, right? Chat and Copilot,
Yeah.
or you can email me and I'll reach back out to you.
Yeah.
And
What-
go ahead.
What's your email again, just so that
Yes.
students know the
Very good.
difference?
Well, I don't want everybody who may be watching this to actually have no, I'm kidding. It's williamsj@kellogg.edu. Not williamsj3@kellogg.edu. That's this guy.
Yeah.
But
Trust me, there have already been problems.
yeah, we
with
were
that.
we're working through that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if you should happen to actually accidentally email Professor Williams, he's great about getting back to me, and he's fully capable actually of answering the questions that you might have as well. Though this is my class,
Yeah.
not his class.
Yes. If you have any questions for me from the younger perspective,
Sure.
totally understand that. Just know I might not be able to get to you as quick as he will because I have my own classes too.
That's true. And works at the state capitol.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so he's getting that real world experience
Yep.
At the same time as teaching. So.
Yep. Doing it for you guys.
That's not what you said earlier. It was,
No.
Yeah, that's right.
No.
All right. So with that, you guys, we're going to sign off until our next time.
See you guys.
Yeah.